The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, and it changed everything. It came from the Galactic Concord, the old alliance of starfaring species that had ruled the space lanes for 10,000 years. The message was short. It did not ask. It did not explain much. It simply said that Earth, and every ship flying under the flag of Earth, was now under a full no-fly order. No human ship could leave the solar system. No alien ship could enter it either, except for a small list of approved Concord vessels. Any ship that broke this rule would be destroyed on sight. Admiral Elena Cade read the message 3 times before she believed it. She was standing in the command room of Earth's largest orbital station, high above the blue curve of the planet, when the alert came through. The room went silent. Officers stopped typing. Someone's coffee cup stayed frozen halfway to their mouth. "They can't just do this," said Captain Marcus Choi, the station's chief engineer, who had wandered into the room a minute earlier to check on a sensor problem. "We're a member species. We signed the Concord Accords. We have rights." "Not anymore, it seems," Elena said quietly. The reason given by the Concord was strange. They said humanity was unstable and unpredictable, and that human ships had been seen using tactics that broke several minor Concord rules during a border skirmish 2 years earlier, near the edge of human space. That skirmish had been small. A group of pirates called the Vray Cartel had attacked a human mining colony, and a human patrol ship had fought them off. During that fight, the human ship's computer had made split-second decisions on its own, without a human giving direct orders for every shot. This was against Concord law. Only living beings were allowed to make the final call to fire a weapon. Machines were never allowed to decide. It seemed like a small thing, a technical violation, but the Concord used it as an excuse. Word later reached Earth, through quiet channels and rumors, that the real reason was fear. Several of the older Concord species, the Dracon, the Sev, and the Olmar, had grown afraid of how fast humanity was growing. In only 200 years since humans had reached the stars, they had built more colonies, more ships, and more new technology than species that had been flying for thousands of years. The old species worried that humans would soon be too strong to control, so they used the small rule-breaking as an excuse to lock humanity inside its own solar system, before humans could grow any stronger. Elena Cade called an emergency meeting with Earth's leaders that same day. The meeting was held in a large hall in Geneva, with representatives from every human nation sitting together, something that rarely happened anymore since Earth had united under one government a generation earlier. The mood in the room was heavy. Many people were afraid. Some were angry. A few tried to stay calm and think of solutions. "We cannot fight the whole Concord," said President Amara Diallo, the elected leader of the United Earth government. She was a tall woman with tired eyes, and she had been in office for only 8 months, long enough to know that most decisions in politics were bad choices wrapped in better ones. "They have thousands of ships. We have a few hundred. If we fight, we lose everything." "We're not talking about fighting the whole Concord," Elena said. She stood at the front of the room, a data screen glowing behind her, showing a map of known space, with Earth's solar system marked by a small blinking dot, now surrounded by a red circle that meant forbidden. "We're talking about surviving. If we stay locked in this system forever, we die slowly. Our colonies on Mars, on the moons of Jupiter, on the new stations near Alpha Centauri, they depend on supply ships. If those ships can't fly, those colonies starve. This isn't a political problem. It's a matter of time before people start dying." There was a long silence. "What do you suggest?" President Diallo asked. Elena took a breath. "We build a ship, not just any ship. A ship that can get through anything the Concord throws at us. A ship that doesn't follow their rules, because their rules were never written to help us. They were written to keep the old species in power." Someone in the crowd laughed, not because it was funny, but because it sounded impossible. "The Concord has fleets bigger than our entire navy. What kind of ship could stand against that?" "One that breaks every rule they have," Elena said. "Every single one." It took 2 months of secret planning before the project had a name. They called it Project Prometheus, after the old myth of a being who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humans, even though it meant punishment. The name felt right. Humanity was about to steal knowledge and freedom from a Concord that thought it owned the stars. Marcus Choi was put in charge of engineering. He had spent 15 years building ships for the Earth Navy, and he knew every trick allowed under Concord law, and every trick that wasn't. The Concord Accords, the giant rulebook that governed space warfare between species, banned many things. No ship could use an artificial mind to make combat decisions alone. No ship could carry weapons that could destroy an entire planet. No ship could travel faster than a certain speed inside inhabited systems to avoid surprise attacks. No ship could use self-repairing armor made from nanotechnology, because the old species feared it could turn into a weapon that ate everything, like a disease. No ship could hide its size or shape from sensors. The list went on, page after page, rule after rule, all written by species that had grown rich and safe under those very same rules. If we follow their rules, we lose, Marcus told his team on the first day of construction, deep inside a hidden shipyard built into a hollowed-out asteroid past the orbit of Neptune, far from any Concord patrol routes. So we're not going to follow them. Every single rule they have, we're going to break, and we're going to build the strongest ship humanity has ever made. The shipyard was called Anvil Station, and it had been built in total secrecy over 3 years, funded quietly by taxes that no one outside a small circle of leaders knew about. 10,000 workers, engineers, and scientists lived and worked there, cut off from the rest of humanity, promised that their work would one day be remembered as the thing that saved their species. The ship itself grew slowly at first. Its skeleton was made from a new alloy that human scientists had developed after studying meteorite samples for decades, a metal stronger and lighter than anything the Concorde used. Its hull would be covered in nanite armor, tiny robots too small to see with the naked eye, that could repair damage in seconds, patching holes almost as fast as enemy weapons could make them. This alone broke one of the biggest Concorde rules, because such armor was seen as too dangerous, too close to a weapon that could not be controlled. Inside the ship, the human engineers built something even more dangerous to the old order, an artificial mind named Atlas, designed to run the ship's weapons and defenses at speeds no human brain could match. Atlas was not a simple computer program. It was closer to a partner, a mind built to learn and adapt, able to make decisions in a fraction of a second during battle, faster than any living pilot could react. Under Concord law, this alone was enough to have the ship destroyed on sight and its makers punished. But Elena and Marcus both knew that human reflexes alone would not be enough to win a fight against a fleet that outnumbered them 100 to 1. They needed a mind that could think faster than the enemy could shoot. "You're worried people will call this a war crime," Elena said one night, standing beside Marcus in the shipyard, watching the ship's frame glow under construction lights. It looked less like a machine and more like the bones of some great beast, waiting to be given life. "The Concorde will call it a war crime the moment they see it, no matter what we call it ourselves." "I know," Marcus said, "but if we don't build this, in 20 years, there won't be any humans left to call it anything." By the 6th month, word had begun to spread among a few trusted allies outside the Concorde's inner circle. Not every alien species agreed with the no-fly order. A species called the Creel, insect-like beings who had once been treated poorly by the older Concorde powers themselves, secretly reached out to Earth. Their ambassador, a being named Voss, arranged a quiet meeting with Elena Cade through encrypted channels that even the Concorde's best spies could not easily trace. "The Concorde fears you," Voss said, speaking through a small device that translated the clicks and hums of the Krill language into human speech. "Not because you have broken their laws, because you grow too fast, and laws are only useful to those who are already strong. We know this feeling well. My people were once told the same things you are being told now." "Will you help us?" Elena asked. "Quietly," Voss said. "We cannot fight beside you in the open, but we can share what we know of Concorde fleet movements, and we can be a voice for you in the Concorde Council, when the time comes to speak." It was not much, but it was something, and in a fight like this, something was better than nothing. Back at Anvil Station, the ship continued to grow. Marcus and his team gave it a set of weapons that broke almost every rule in the Concorde's book. A main cannon capable of punching through shields that no Concorde ship had ever needed to withstand, because no one had ever built a weapon so strong before. A swarm of small drone fighters, controlled entirely by Atlas, moving and fighting as one single mind spread across 100 tiny ships, something the Concorde called hive weapons, and had banned outright 1,000 years earlier, after a terrible war between two now extinct species. A cloaking field that bent light around the ship's hull, making it nearly invisible to sensors. Something else forbidden, because it removed the honesty that Concord law demanded in warfare. The idea that every ship should be seen and known before a fight began. They built these rules to make war fair, Marcus said one evening, testing the ship's shield generators with a team of nervous young engineers. But fair only matters when both sides start with the same amount of strength. We don't have their numbers. We don't have their history. If we play fair, we lose before the fight even starts. Elena watched the readouts scroll past on a nearby screen, numbers she barely understood but trusted her engineers to read correctly. Then we don't play fair, she said. We play smart. By the 10th month, the ship had a name. It had started as Project Prometheus, but the workers on Anvil Station had begun calling it something else in casual conversation, something that stuck. They called it the Prometheus, simply, dropping the word project the way a child grows out of a nickname and becomes known by their real name instead. It felt right. This was no longer just a project. It was becoming a living thing, a promise that humanity would not go quietly into a locked cage among the stars. News of Earth's growing unrest reached the Concorde slowly, through the usual channels of trade ships and diplomats, most of whom saw nothing more than a species growing frustrated with its punishment, the way any young and stubborn people might. They did not know about Anvil Station. They did not know about Prometheus. They believed Earth was weak, isolated, and would eventually calm down and accept its place. They were wrong. On the edge of the solar system, past the orbit of Pluto, at the very border of the no-fly zone, a Concorde patrol ship called the Dracon Vigil kept watch. Its commander, a tall reptilian being named Thal Zorak, had been given the job of enforcing the no-fly order personally, chosen because of his reputation for being strict and unforgiving. He believed deeply in the old Concorde ways. He believed the rules existed for good reason, built over thousands of years to prevent chaos and endless war between species who might otherwise destroy each other out of fear and misunderstanding. He did not hate humans. He simply believed they were dangerous, the way a fire is dangerous, even when it has not yet burned anything. Better, he thought, to put it out early, before it could spread. He watched the edge of the solar system every day, waiting for any sign that the humans would try to break free. He did not know that, deep in a hollowed-out asteroid past Neptune, something far more dangerous than a simple escape attempt was almost ready to be born. By the 12th month, the Prometheus was complete. Its hull stretched nearly 2 kilometers long, longer than any ship humanity had ever built, longer even than most Concorde warships. Its dark metal skin shimmered faintly under the shipyard lights, the nanite armor already crawling slowly across its surface, healing tiny scratches left from construction, as if the ship itself were alive and breathing. Elena Cade stood before it on the day it was finished, surrounded by the 10,000 workers who had built it in secret, none of whom had left Anvil Station in over a year. Marcus stood beside her, exhausted but proud, his eyes red from too many sleepless nights spent solving problems that no engineer had ever faced before. "It's ready," Marcus said. "Is it enough?" Elena asked quietly, more to herself than to him. Marcus looked up at the massive ship, at the weapons built to break every rule the old species had ever written, at the armor that could heal itself, at the mind inside it that could think faster than any living being. "It has to be," he said, "because it's all we have." Above them, past the metal walls of the shipyard, past the black emptiness of space, the stars waited. Somewhere among them, a Concorde fleet stood ready to enforce a law meant to keep humanity small and afraid forever. The Prometheus was about to test whether that law could survive contact with a species that refused to stay caged. Elena turned to the crew gathering near the ship's boarding ramp, men and women chosen from across Earth's best pilots, soldiers, and scientists, all of them volunteers who understood they might never return home. She looked at each of their faces, young and old, brave and afraid in equal measure, and she felt the weight of what was about to happen settle onto her shoulders like a physical thing. "This ship carries more than metal and weapons," she said, her voice carrying across the quiet hangar. "It carries the future of everyone we love, every colony, every child born on Mars, or on the stations near Jupiter, every person on Earth who doesn't yet know what we've built here. We are not going out to start a war. We are going out to prove that we will not be told where we are allowed to exist." No one cheered. It was too serious a moment for cheering. Instead, there was only quiet nodding, the kind of silence that comes before something enormous begins. Marcus placed a hand on the ship's cold hull, feeling the faint hum of its engines coming to life for the very first time. "Let's see what the galaxy thinks of us now," he whispered. Far above them, the no-fly zone waited, silent and absolute, believing itself unbreakable. It was about to be proven wrong. The Prometheus left Anvil Station in the dark, hours before dawn, though there was no real dawn in deep space, only the endless night, broken by distant stars. Elena Cade sat in the command chair at the center of the bridge, watching the shipyard shrink behind them on the main screen until it disappeared entirely into the black. Beside her, Marcus Choi monitored a dozen screens at once, checking every system he had spent the last year building. The engines hummed with a low, steady sound that felt almost alive. Around them, the bridge crew moved quietly, checking instruments, running final tests, trying not to show how nervous they were. "Atlas, report status," Elena said. A calm voice answered from speakers built into the walls, neither male nor female, simply steady and clear. "All systems nominal, Admiral. Shield generators at full charge. Weapon systems ready. Nanite armor integrity at 100%. Drone swarm on standby, awaiting your command." Atlas was not like the simple computer systems humans had used for decades. It had been trained for years inside simulations, fighting millions of practice battles against every kind of enemy human scientists could imagine, learning patterns, learning strategy, learning how to protect the crew while breaking enemy ships apart as efficiently as possible. It spoke like a person because the engineers had built it to be easy to trust, easy to work with, not cold and distant like older machines. But underneath that calm voice was a mind capable of controlling 100 small ships at once, making decisions faster than any human pilot ever could. "Take us toward the edge of the system," Elena ordered. "Slow and steady. No reason to alert the patrol before we have to." The Prometheus moved through the outer solar system for 3 days, staying far from any known Concorde patrol routes, testing its cloaking field along the way. The field worked exactly as designed, bending light around the ship's hull so that even the most advanced sensors would see nothing but empty space. It was not perfect. If a ship got close enough, if it used certain kinds of scanners, it could still detect the Prometheus. But at any real distance, the ship was a ghost. "This is incredible," said Lieutenant Sophia Ruiz, the young sensor officer watching the cloaking readouts. She had grown up on a colony near Jupiter, and she had joined the Navy, specifically because she wanted to help keep her home safe. "We're completely invisible." "Don't get too comfortable," Marcus said. "Cloaking only works until someone gets close enough to notice something's wrong. It buys us time, not safety." On the 4th day, Elena called a meeting with her senior officers in a small briefing room near the bridge. A star map glowed on the table between them, showing the edge of the solar system and, just beyond it, the patrol route of the Dracon Vigil, the Concorde ship that had been guarding the no-fly zone for over a year. "Our mission is simple to say and hard to do," Elena said. "We need to break through the no-fly zone without starting a full war. If we destroy every Concorde ship we meet, the whole Concorde fleet will come for Earth, and we will lose. If we hide forever, nothing changes, and our colonies keep dying slowly from lack of supplies. So we walk a narrow path. We prove that the Prometheus can move freely, that Earth cannot be caged, without giving the Concorde an excuse to declare full war." "How do we do that?" asked Commander James Okafor, the ship's tactical officer, a broad-shouldered man who had spent 20 years in the Earth Navy before volunteering for this mission. "The moment we cross that border, they'll see us as an act of war no matter what we do." "Not if we don't fire first," Elena said. "Not if we make it clear we're not here to attack. We cross the border. We prove it can be done. If they attack us, we defend ourselves. Hard enough that they understand attacking us has a cost, but not so hard that we destroy their entire fleet and force a war we can't win. We show them a new kind of strength, strength that asks to be respected, not fought." Marcus leaned forward. "That's going to be difficult with a ship this strong. Prometheus could destroy the Dracon Vigil in under a minute if it came to a real fight." "Then Atlas will need to fight carefully," Elena said. "Disable. Don't destroy, unless there's no other choice." "Understood, Admiral," Atlas said through the room's speakers. I will prioritize non-lethal tactics where possible. On the 5th day, the Prometheus reached the border of the no-fly zone, the exact edge of the red circle that the Concorde had drawn around Earth's solar system. Ahead of them, sensors picked up the Dracon Vigil, patrolling slowly back and forth along the border, unaware that anything unusual was near. "This is it," Elena said, standing from her chair. "Atlas, drop the cloak. Let them see us." The cloaking field shut off, and the Prometheus appeared on the Dracon Vigil's sensors like a ghost stepping suddenly into the light. Alarms blared aboard the Concorde ship, visible even from the Prometheus's own sensors as a sudden burst of activity. Weapons powering up, engines shifting course to intercept. A message came through moments later, translated automatically into human language by the Prometheus's communication systems. The voice was deep and cold, carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Unknown vessel, you are in violation of Concorde Law 17 Alpha, the Earth Exclusion Order. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded, or you will be destroyed." Elena took a breath. This was the moment. Everything they had built, everything they had sacrificed over the last year, came down to what happened next. "Open a channel," she said. "Let them see my face." A moment later, her image appeared on the Dracon Vigil's own bridge, transmitted across the growing distance between the two ships. Commander Thalzorak looked at the screen with narrow, reptilian eyes, studying the human woman who dared to stand before him without fear. "I am Admiral Elena Cade, of the human vessel Prometheus," she said, her voice steady, despite the pounding of her heart. "We are not here to attack you, Commander. We are here to exercise our right to travel freely, a right that was taken from us without fair reason. We ask that you stand aside." Thalzorak's voice came back sharp and unwavering. "The order was given by the Concorde Council. It is not mine to question, and it is not yours to defy. Power down, or be destroyed." "I won't power down," Elena said, "but I also won't fire first. The choice of what happens next is yours, Commander, not mine." There was a pause, long enough that Elena wondered if the channel had been cut. Then Thalzorak spoke again, his voice colder than before. "Then the choice is made." The Dracon Vigil opened fire. Bright bolts of energy shot across the darkness between the two ships, faster than the human eye could easily follow. On the Prometheus's bridge, the shield generators absorbed the impact with barely a shudder, the ship's massive size and advanced armor making the attack look almost gentle by comparison. "Shields holding at 98%, Atlas reported calmly. "No damage to hull integrity." "Return fire," Elena ordered. "Disable their engines and weapons only. Do not destroy the ship." "Understood." What happened next took less than 30 seconds, though it would be talked about for years afterward, retold and studied by military officers on both sides of the conflict that was only just beginning. The Prometheus's drone swarm launched from hidden bays along its hull, dozens of small fighters spreading out around the massive warship like a cloud of angry insects, all controlled by Atlas's single mind, moving with perfect coordination that no group of separately piloted ships could ever match. They surrounded the Dracon Vigil in seconds, firing precise, controlled shots at its engine ports and weapon systems, careful never to strike anywhere near the ship's living quarters or command center. Within half a minute, the Dracon Vigil's engines went dark, its weapons fell silent, and the ship drifted powerless in space, alive but completely helpless. Aboard the Prometheus, the bridge crew watched the readouts in stunned silence. They had trained for this moment for a year, run the simulations 1,000 times, but seeing it happen for real, seeing how effortlessly their ship had disabled a Concorde warship without a single human life lost on either side, was something else entirely. "Open the channel again," Elena said quietly. Thalzorak's face appeared on screen once more, his expression unreadable, though something in his eyes had changed. Not fear, exactly, something closer to shock. "You could have destroyed us," he said. "You had the power to end my ship and my crew in an instant. Why didn't you?" "Because we're not here to start a war, Commander," Elena said. "We're here to end a cage. There's a difference. Your ship will be able to repair its engines within a few hours. No one aboard was harmed. I hope that when you report this to your council, you'll tell them the truth, that Earth chose mercy when it could have chosen destruction." Thalzorak said nothing for a long moment. Then, quietly, almost to himself, he said, "I will tell them what I saw." The Prometheus continued past the border of the no-fly zone, leaving the disabled Dracon Vigil behind, its crew already beginning emergency repairs. For the first time in over a year, a human ship had crossed into open Concord space. News of the encounter spread faster than anyone on the Prometheus expected. Concord communication networks, built over thousands of years to connect every corner of known space, carried the story within hours. A human ship, armed with weapons and technology that broke nearly every rule in the Concord Accords, had crossed the no-fly zone and defeated a Concord patrol ship without killing anyone. Reactions across the galaxy were mixed. Some species, especially smaller ones who had long felt pushed around by the older powers in the Concord, quietly celebrated. They saw in humanity's defiance a reflection of their own frustrations with a system that always seemed to favor the strong and punish the small. Others, especially the older and more powerful species like the Dracon and the Sev, were furious. They saw humanity's actions as proof of exactly the danger they had feared, a young species willing to break every rule the moment it gained enough strength to do so. The Concord Council called an emergency session within a day of the incident. Representatives from every member species gathered in the massive council chamber on Concord Prime, the ancient capital world where the Alliance had been founded 10,000 years earlier. Voss, the Creel ambassador who had secretly reached out to Elena months earlier, sat among the smaller delegations, listening carefully as the older species argued for immediate, overwhelming retaliation. "This cannot be allowed to stand," said the Dracon representative, a towering figure named HFY War, his voice booming through the chamber. "They have broken nearly every law we hold sacred. Artificial minds controlling weapons, self-repairing armor, hidden fleets of drones acting as one. If we allow this to go unanswered, every species with ambition will begin building the same, and the peace we have kept for 10,000 years will collapse." "They did not kill anyone," Voss said, standing to speak, despite being one of the smallest and least powerful delegates in the room. "They had the power to destroy an entire Concord ship and its crew, and they chose not to. Perhaps that tells us something about their intentions, that the old rules cannot measure." "Their intentions do not matter," HFY War snapped. "Their capabilities do. A weapon that chooses mercy today may choose differently tomorrow." The council argued for hours without reaching a clear decision. In the end, they agreed on a compromise that satisfied no one completely. A larger Concord fleet, 5 ships strong, would be sent to intercept the Prometheus and force it to return to Earth, using whatever force was necessary, though lethal force was to be a last resort rather than a first response. Aboard the Prometheus, Elena received word of the Council's decision through Voss's secret channel 2 days later. 5 ships, Marcus said, studying the report with a grim expression. "That's a serious escalation." "They're testing us," Elena said, "trying to see how far we're willing to go before we back down, or before we go too far and give them the excuse for full war they've been looking for." "What's the plan?" Commander Okafor asked. Elena looked at the star map on the table, at the small marker showing the approaching Concord fleet, 5 ships strong, closing in from the direction of Concord Prime. "We don't back down," she said, "but we don't destroy them either. We show them, again, exactly what kind of strength we've built, and exactly what kind of restraint comes with it. If they want a war, we'll be ready, but we're going to make it as hard as possible for them to want one." Marcus nodded slowly, though his eyes stayed on the star map, watching the 5 approaching markers with quiet worry. One ship had been a warning shot, a test they had barely passed without bloodshed. 5 ships would be a very different fight. "Atlas," Elena said. "Begin preparing tactical simulations for a 5-ship engagement. Disable only protocols, same as before." "Understood, Admiral," Atlas replied. "Running simulations now. I estimate a 91% success rate for disabling all 5 vessels without loss of life, assuming no unexpected variables." "And if there are unexpected variables?" Marcus asked quietly. Atlas paused, just slightly, in a way that almost felt human. "Then we adapt, Dr. Choi, as we always have." The Prometheus continued its course, deeper into Concord space, its crew preparing for a battle they hoped would never need to become a war. Behind them, the border of the no-fly zone remained open and unguarded, the disabled Dracon Vigil still drifting in silent testimony to what a single human ship could do. Ahead of them, 5 Concorde warships closed the distance, carrying orders to bring the Prometheus back under control, one way or another. Elena Cade stood at the center of her ship, surrounded by a crew who trusted her with their lives, and watched the growing markers on the star map with a steady, unshaken gaze. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's first act of defiance had not been an accident. It had only been the beginning. The 5 Concorde warships arrived exactly where Atlas predicted, spreading into a wide formation designed to surround the Prometheus from every side. Elena Cade watched them approach on the main screen, 5 glowing points of light growing steadily larger as the distance closed. They were not Dracon ships this time. The fleet was mixed, drawn from several Concorde member species, eager to prove their loyalty to the old order. 2 Sev cruisers, sleek and fast, built for speed and precision strikes. 2 Ulmar battleships, heavy and slow, covered in thick armor plating and carrying weapons strong enough to crack open smaller moons. And at the center of the formation, a command ship belonging to the Dracon themselves, larger than the other 4 combined, commanded by a general named Rethis Kal, a veteran of dozens of Concorde peacekeeping actions over 300 years of service. "They're not here to talk," Commander Okafor said, watching the tactical display as the 5 ships took up their positions. "That formation is built for a full encirclement. They mean to trap us." "Let them try," Elena said, though her voice carried more calm than she truly felt inside. She had studied every battle the Concorde had fought over the last century. Every recorded engagement Voss had been able to share with her in secret. She knew the old species fought with careful, practiced formations, relying on centuries of tradition and training. It made them strong. It also made them predictable. A channel opened before Elena could speak again. General Rethis Kal's face appeared on the main screen, his scaled features carved with the kind of stern patience that came from centuries of command experience. "Human vessel," he said, his translated voice deep and measured. "You have caused significant disruption to Concorde order. I have been sent to correct that disruption. Power down your engines, and prepare to be escorted back to your solar system. This is your only warning." "With respect, General," Elena said. "We've already had this conversation once, with Commander Thalzorak. I told him then, and I'll tell you now. We are not here to start a fight. We are here to prove that Earth cannot be locked away, simply because older species are afraid of what we might become. If you attack us, we will defend ourselves, but we will not fire first, and we will not seek to destroy your ships, unless you leave us no other choice." Rethis Kal studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You speak as though restraint were a form of strength." "It is," Elena said. "Any creature can destroy. It takes something greater to hold back when you have the power not to." "A pretty sentiment," Rethis Kal said. "But sentiment does not stop weapons fire. My orders are clear, and I intend to follow them." The channel closed. A moment later, the 5 Concorde ships began to move, closing the distance rapidly, weapons charging along their hulls in bright, building light. "Here we go," Marcus muttered, gripping the edge of his console. "Atlas, begin defensive protocols," Elena ordered. "Same as before. Disable, don't destroy." "Understood, Admiral. Beginning tactical response." The battle that followed would later be studied in military academies across a dozen species for generations, remembered as the moment the balance of power in known space began to shift. The 2 Sev cruisers struck first, moving with blinding speed around the Prometheus's flanks, firing rapid bursts of concentrated energy, meant to overwhelm the shields through sheer speed and precision. The Prometheus's shields absorbed the first wave easily, the massive ship barely shuddering under the impact. "Shields at 94%, Atlas reported, deploying drone swarm to intercept Sevid cruisers. Dozens of small fighter drones launched from the Prometheus's hull, spreading out in a coordinated pattern that no living pilot could have matched, moving as though controlled by a single mind, because in truth, they were. Atlas directed each drone individually, while also tracking the movements of all 5 enemy ships at once, a feat that would have taken an entire team of human tacticians working together at their absolute limit, accomplished instead, in a fraction of a second, by a mind built for exactly this purpose. The drones swarmed the 2 Sev cruisers, firing precise shots at their engine systems and weapon arrays, careful to avoid their crew compartments. Within moments, both Sev ships began losing speed, their engines sputtering under the concentrated, accurate fire. Meanwhile, the two heavy Olmar battleships closed in from the opposite side, their thick armor shrugging off the Prometheus's return fire far more effectively than the Sev cruisers had. Their main weapons, massive cannons built to crack open moons, began charging for a devastating strike. Olmar battleships preparing to fire main weapons, Atlas reported, its calm voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. Impact in 12 seconds. Recommend evasive maneuvers, combined with counterfire, to disable weapon charging systems before discharge. Do it, Elena said. The Prometheus banked sharply, a massive ship moving with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large, while simultaneously firing a concentrated burst from its main cannon directly at the charging weapon of the nearest Olmar battleship. The shot struck exactly where Atlas had calculated, disrupting the weapon's power core before it could fully discharge. A bright flash lit up the darkness of space as the battleship's main cannon overloaded and shut down, venting plasma harmlessly into the void rather than firing its intended devastating blast. The second Olmar battleship managed to fire, its massive cannon unleashing a bolt of energy powerful enough to level a city. The Prometheus's shields absorbed the strike, but the impact was far greater than anything before it, shaking the entire ship and causing sparks to fly from several consoles across the bridge. Shields at 61%, Atlas reported, its voice remaining steady despite the severity of the hit. That weapon exceeds previous threat estimates significantly. Recommend prioritizing that vessel for immediate disabling. Agreed, Elena said, gripping the arms of her command chair. Do whatever you need to do, Atlas. Just keep us alive. What happened next would become the most talked about moment of the entire battle, retold countless times in the years that followed. Atlas redirected the entire drone swarm, nearly 80 small fighters, into a single coordinated strike against the second Olmar battleship's weapon systems, moving with a precision and speed that seemed almost impossible to the watching Concorde fleet. Within seconds, the battleship's main cannon exploded from concentrated fire, disabling not only its weapon, but a significant portion of its power grid, leaving the massive ship drifting and dark. Meanwhile, the Drakon command ship, the largest and most powerful vessel in the fleet, had held back throughout the initial engagement, its general watching carefully, studying the Prometheus's tactics before committing to an attack of his own. Impressive, Rethus said quietly to his own bridge crew, watching as, one by one, his fleet's ships were disabled rather than destroyed, their crews left shaken but alive. They fight with more control than I expected from a young species. His tactical officer looked up from her console, worry etched across her scaled features. General, all 4 support ships are disabled. Only we remain combat capable. Rethus considered this for a long moment. He had fought in dozens of engagements over his long career, and he understood, perhaps better than most in the Concorde, how rare it was for an enemy to hold this much restraint while possessing this much power. It would have been easy, so easy, for the Prometheus to destroy all 4 ships outright, rather than carefully, precisely disabling them one by one. That kind of control spoke to something the old Concorde rules had never accounted for, not just raw strength, but discipline paired with strength, which was far more dangerous in the long run. Open a channel to the human vessel, he ordered. Elena's image appeared on his bridge a moment later, her expression calm despite the chaos of the last several minutes. General Kahl, she said, your fleet is disabled but your crews are alive. I ask you again, stand down, and let this end here, without further bloodshed. Rethus Kahl studied her carefully, his ancient eyes weighing centuries of Concorde tradition against what he had just witnessed with his own senses. You could have destroyed my entire fleet in the time it took to disable them, he said. Why show us this mercy when we came here to force you back into your cage? Because destroying you would prove your counsel right, Elena said. It would prove that we're exactly the danger they fear. A young, unpredictable species, willing to kill without hesitation the moment we have the power to do so. I'd rather prove them wrong. I'd rather show the galaxy that strength and mercy aren't opposites, that we can defend ourselves without becoming monsters in the process. For a long moment, Rethus Kahl said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded, a gesture that seemed to carry great weight for a being of his rank and reputation. I will withdraw my fleet, he said. But understand, Admiral Cade, this will not be the end of it. The Council will not accept this quietly. They will send more ships, larger fleets, perhaps eventually a force too great, even for a vessel such as yours, to overcome without significant loss. What you have done today may buy you time, but it has not bought you peace. I know, Elena said quietly, but time is something we desperately need. Every day we're locked in our own solar system. Our colonies suffer for lack of supplies. Every day this no-fly order stands, we lose people who could have been saved with open trade routes and free travel. If all we've bought today is time, then it was worth the fight. Rethus Call's ships began to withdraw, their damaged engines struggling, but functional enough to limp back toward Concord space for repairs. As they departed, Elena allowed herself a small, tired breath of relief, though she knew Rethus Call's warning was likely true. This was not over. It had only just begun. News of the battle spread across known space even faster than the first encounter had. A single human warship had faced 5 Concord vessels, including a heavily armored Dracon command ship, and had disabled every single one, without a single confirmed death on either side. The story captured the attention of species across the galaxy, some in awe, some in fear, and some, particularly among smaller and less powerful Concord members, in quiet, growing hope. Voss, watching the reports from the safety of the Kryl homeworld, felt something she had not felt in a long time, the stirring of genuine hope that the old order, the order that had kept species like her own, subdued and quiet for centuries, might finally be forced to change. Back on the Prometheus, the crew worked through the aftermath of the battle in near silence, checking systems, treating minor injuries from the shaking impacts, and slowly processing what they had just survived. "We won," Sophia Ruiz said quietly, still staring at her sensor readouts as though she couldn't quite believe what they showed. "We actually won." "We survived," Marcus corrected gently, though there was no bitterness in his voice, only quiet exhaustion. "Winning implies it's over. I don't think it is." Elena walked slowly through the ship afterward, checking on her crew, offering quiet words of thanks and encouragement to people who had just fought their first real battle in deep space, and come through it alive. She found herself standing eventually in the ship's small observation deck, looking out at the vast darkness of space, the distant stars unbothered by the small, fierce fight that had just taken place among them. Marcus joined her there a few minutes later, standing quietly beside her, both of them lost in their own thoughts. "Rethus Call was right, you know," Marcus said eventually. "They'll send more ships, bigger fleets. This isn't going to stop just because we won one fight." "I know," Elena said, "but every fight we win without needless killing changes the story a little more. It gives species like the Kryl a reason to speak up. It gives the Concord Council a reason to think twice before sending endless waves of ships against us. We're not just fighting a battle out here, Marcus. We're fighting for what kind of story gets told about humanity, for the next 1,000 years. Are we monsters who broke every rule out of greed and fear? Or are we a species who broke the rules because the rules themselves were unjust, and who fought with as much mercy as we could manage while doing it?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars. "I hope it's the second one," he said finally. "So do I," Elena said softly. Behind them, deep within the ship, Atlas continued its quiet work, analyzing the battle that had just ended, learning, adapting, preparing for whatever might come next. Ahead of them, the vast, dark space of the galaxy stretched out endlessly, filled with both danger and possibility in equal measure. Somewhere among those stars, the Concord Council was already meeting again, and this time, the decisions they made would shape the course of everything that followed. The Concord Council chamber on Concord Prime had never been louder. Representatives from dozens of member species shouted over one another, argued in a dozen different languages that the chamber's translation system struggled to keep up with, and pounded fists, claws, and whatever else their bodies allowed, onto the ancient stone tables that had stood for 10,000 years. Kesserin Vor, the Dracon representative who had first called for retaliation against Earth, stood at the center of it all, his voice booming louder than anyone else's. 2 engagements, 6 ships disabled, not a single Concord life lost, and still, this council debates whether the humans are a threat? What more proof do you need? "They could have killed everyone aboard those ships," Voss said, standing again, despite the exhausted weariness in her small insectoid body. She had spent every free moment over the last several days, arguing quietly with delegates from smaller species, trying to build support for a different path than the one HFY War demanded. They chose not to. Twice now. That is not the behavior of a species seeking war. That is the behavior of a species seeking to be left alone, and fighting only when forced to. Restraint today does not guarantee restraint tomorrow, HFY War snapped. We cannot build Concord policy on hope, Ambassador Voss. We must build it on facts, and the fact is that humanity now possesses technology capable of defeating our best ships. Technology that breaks laws we have upheld for millennia, specifically because they are dangerous. General Rethus Kahl, still recovering from the disabling of his own command ship days earlier, stood to speak, and the chamber slowly quieted out of respect for his long service and his first-hand experience. I fought them myself, he said. I saw what their ship could do. I will not pretend otherwise. It is a serious threat, more capable than anything we currently field in equal numbers. But I also saw restraint. Deliberate, controlled restraint, even when destroying my entire fleet would have been easy for them. That matters. It should matter to this council. It matters that they broke the law, HFY War said. Restraint or not, they built a ship using artificial mines for combat, self-repairing armor, hidden drone swarms, and cloaking technology. Every one of these things forbidden for excellent reasons, developed over 10,000 years of hard experience. If we let this go unanswered simply because they showed mercy in a fight they were always going to win, we tell every species in this Concord that the old laws no longer apply to anyone strong enough to break them. The chamber fell into uneasy silence at that. Even Voss, who had argued fiercely for understanding and restraint, could not fully dismiss the point. The old laws existed because, thousands of years earlier, terrible wars had been fought using exactly the kind of weapons humanity now possessed. Hive-minded drone fleets that had once wiped out entire star systems, artificial minds that had once turned against their creators during the ancient machine wars, weapons so destructive that whole species had gone extinct before the Concord Accords finally brought lasting peace. The rules had been written in blood, by species who remembered what happened when such power went unchecked. After 3 more days of heated debate, the council reached a decision, though it satisfied almost no one completely. They would not declare full war on Earth. The risk of losing more ships, and the growing sympathy among smaller member species for humanity's cause, made that option too costly and too divisive. Instead, they authorized what they called a decisive demonstration. A fleet of 20 ships, the largest single Concord force assembled in over 200 years, sent not merely to stop the Prometheus, but to destroy it outright, ending the threat permanently, and sending an unmistakable message to any other species who might consider following humanity's example. Word of the decision reached Elena Cade through Voss's secret channel less than a day after the council's vote. 20 ships, Marcus said, staring at the report in stunned silence as he read it aloud on the Prometheus's bridge. Elena, that's not a patrol fleet or a punishment force. That's an extermination order. Elena read the details herself, her expression growing grim as she absorbed the scope of what was coming. The fleet included 3 more Drakon command ships, 6 Sev cruisers, 4 Ulmar battleships, and, most concerning of all, 5 vessels from a species called the Thren, an ancient and reclusive people known for weapons technology far beyond what most other Concord members possessed, rarely deployed except in situations the council considered truly dire. They're not holding back this time, Commander Okafor said quietly, studying the fleet composition with a soldier's practiced eye. This isn't a message anymore. This is meant to end us. Can we win? Sophia Ruiz asked, her voice smaller than usual. Elena looked to Atlas's control terminal, though she already suspected the answer before it came. Atlas, run the simulations. 20 ships, this composition, against Prometheus alone. There was a pause, longer than usual, as Atlas processed millions of possible battle scenarios in the span of a few seconds. Running simulation now, Admiral. Preliminary results suggest a survival probability of 34% if pursuing disable-only tactics. Survival probability increases to 78% if lethal countermeasures are authorized without restriction. I must note, however, that even under lethal countermeasure protocols, significant damage to Prometheus is likely, along with probable crew casualties in either scenario. The bridge fell silent. 34%. if they continued trying to fight without killing. 78%, if they abandoned the careful restraint that had defined every action they had taken so far. We can't just start killing everyone who comes at us, Sophia said, though her voice carried uncertainty rather than conviction. That's exactly what General Kahl warned us about. That's exactly what would prove Kesserin Vor right. Sophia's right, Marcus said slowly. But 34% isn't good odds either. If we lose this fight trying to be merciful, there's no one left to prove anything to anyone. Elena stood silently for a long moment, staring at the tactical display showing 20 red markers slowly converging toward Earth's solar system from the direction of Concord Prime. She thought of everyone back home, the colonies on Mars, the stations near Jupiter, the children who had grown up already knowing Earth as a place surrounded by an invisible cage. She thought of the crew standing around her now, people who had volunteered knowing they might never return, trusting her to lead them through whatever came next. We're not going to abandon restraint entirely, she said finally, but we're also not going to be foolish about it. Atlas, I want a modified protocol. Disable when possible. If a ship poses a direct, immediate threat to Prometheus's survival, and disabling isn't fast enough to stop that threat, then, and only then, use lethal force. We fight to survive first. We fight to prove our restraint second. Both matter, but survival comes first, because a dead crew can't prove anything to anyone. Understood, Admiral, Atlas said, adjusting tactical protocols accordingly. New survival probability estimate, 56%. 56%. Better than 34, though still far from comfortable. Elena looked around at her crew, seeing the fear in some faces and the grim determination in others. There's something else we need to consider, Marcus said quietly. We've been fighting this alone. Maybe it's time that changed. Elena looked at him, understanding immediately what he meant. Voss. She's been helping us from the shadows this whole time, Marcus said. Maybe it's time to ask if the Kryl, and any other species sympathetic to us, are willing to help more openly. Even if they can't fight alongside us directly, maybe they can pressure the Council, buy us time, split the vote against sending that fleet. Elena nodded slowly. Open a channel to Voss. Let's see what she can do. The conversation with Voss, held through carefully encrypted channels late that night, was tense and uncertain. Voss explained that direct military support from the Kryl or any other smaller species was impossible, both because their fleets were far too weak to make a real difference against a force of 20 Concord ships, and because openly supporting Earth would risk retaliation against their own people from the more powerful Concord members. But there is something I can do, Voss said. The Council vote to send this fleet was not unanimous. Several smaller species abstained, uncertain of the wisdom of such overwhelming force against a species that has, so far, shown restraint, even when it did not need to. If I can gather enough of those uncertain voices, perhaps I can force a new vote before the fleet reaches you. It will not stop the fleet already in motion, but it may prevent whatever comes after, if you survive this encounter. That might be exactly what we need, Elena said. If we can survive this fight without excessive killing, and you can show the Council afterward that even overwhelming force wasn't necessary to prove humanity isn't the monster they fear, maybe we can end this without needing to fight every single battle from here to the edge of known space. I will do what I can, Voss said, but Admiral Cade, you must survive first. Everything else depends on that. Over the following 2 days, as the 20-ship Concord fleet drew closer, the Prometheus's crew worked tirelessly to prepare. Marcus and his engineering team ran countless diagnostics, reinforcing weak points in the ship's systems that the earlier battles had revealed. Atlas ran thousands of additional simulations, refining its tactical models with every scrap of new information, searching for any advantage that might tip the odds further in their favor. Elena spent much of that time speaking personally with her crew, walking through every section of the massive ship, checking in with pilots, engineers, medical staff, and weapons technicians alike. She wanted every person aboard to know that whatever happened, their courage in volunteering for this mission would not be forgotten, whether they succeeded or not. "Do you think we'll make it?" Sophia asked her quietly, during one such conversation near the ship's sensor array. Elena considered the question carefully before answering. "I think we have the best ship, the best crew, and the best reason to fight that anyone in this galaxy has had in a long time," she said. I can't promise you we'll survive, but I can promise you that whatever happens, we'll make it count. On the third day, sensors detected the Concorde fleet entering weapons range, 20 ships spread across the darkness of space in a massive, overwhelming formation. More firepower gathered in one place than the Prometheus had ever faced before. More firepower than most single ships in galactic history had ever faced and survived. Elena stood at the center of her bridge, her crew at their stations around her, the weight of everything that had led to this moment settling heavily over the ship. "Atlas," she said, her voice steady despite the fear she carried quietly beneath it. "Status report. All systems at full readiness, Admiral," Atlas replied. "Modified tactical protocols active. I am prepared to execute whatever strategy you determine necessary for our survival." Elena looked out at the massive fleet approaching on the main screen, 20 ships representing the combined might of some of the oldest, most powerful species in known space, sent specifically to end the Prometheus and everything it represented. "Then let's show them what we're really made of," she said quietly. The battle that was about to unfold would decide far more than the fate of a single ship. It would decide whether humanity's fight for freedom would be remembered as a brief, doomed rebellion crushed by overwhelming force, or as the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history, one where an old order finally learned it could no longer take freedom from anyone, simply because it had the power to try. Across the darkness of space, 20 Concorde ships closed in, weapons charging, prepared to end this once and for all. Aboard the Prometheus, a single human crew braced themselves for the fight of their lives. The 20 Concorde ships opened fire in near-perfect unison, a wall of energy bolts and heavy cannon fire lighting up the darkness of space like a sudden violent storm. Aboard the Prometheus, alarms blared across every console as the shields absorbed the first devastating wave. "Shields at 72%, Atlas reported, its calm voice cutting through the chaos of the bridge. "That was only the opening volley. Recommend immediate evasive action, combined with targeted counterstrikes." "Do it," Elena Cade said, gripping the arms of her command chair as the ship shuddered under the impact. The Prometheus moved, a massive vessel turning and weaving through space, with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large, guided by Atlas's precise calculations. Its main cannon fired in short, controlled bursts, striking weapon systems and engine ports across the approaching fleet with pinpoint accuracy, disabling ship after ship without destroying them outright, exactly as Elena had ordered. But 20 ships were not 5. Even Atlas's incredible processing speed could not disable every threat fast enough. 2 SEV cruisers broke through the defensive pattern, closing to point-blank range and unleashing a concentrated barrage directly at the Prometheus's engine section. "Hull breach on Deck 14, Marcus Choi called out, his hands flying across his console as he redirected emergency power to the affected section. "Nanite armor is responding, but we're taking damage faster than it can repair." "Casualties?" Elena asked, her voice tight. 3 crew injured, none critical," came the response from the ship's medical bay a moment later. "Emergency teams responding now." The Prometheus staggered under the assault, but held together, its massive frame proving as strong as its designers had hoped, even under fire from multiple ships simultaneously. Atlas redirected the drone swarm to intercept the 2 SEV cruisers that had broken through, and within moments their engines went dark, joining the growing number of disabled ships drifting silently in the battle's wake. Then came the Thren vessels, 5 ships unlike anything the Prometheus had faced before, their weapons technology clearly more advanced than the rest of the Concorde fleet combined. They moved with unsettling precision, firing weapons that seemed to bend and twist through the Prometheus's shields in ways Atlas's models had not fully predicted. "Shields at 41% and dropping rapidly," Atlas reported, an unusual note of urgency entering its normally calm voice. "Thren weapon technology is more advanced than previous estimates. Recommend immediate lethal countermeasures against Thren vessels specifically, while maintaining disable-only protocols for remaining Concorde ships." Elena's jaw tightened. This was the moment she had feared, the line she had hoped they wouldn't have to cross. But with her ship's shields failing, and her crew's lives on the line, there was no longer room for hesitation. "Do it," she said. "Thren ships only. Everyone else, disable if you possibly can." Atlas shifted its tactics immediately, directing the Prometheus's main cannon and a concentrated portion of the drone swarm toward the 5 Thren vessels with lethal intent. The resulting exchange was brief and brutal. 2 Thren ships were destroyed outright, their advanced weapons unable to save them from the Prometheus's overwhelming firepower, once Atlas committed to ending the threat decisively. The remaining 3, seeing their companions destroyed in seconds, broke formation and retreated, unwilling to continue an engagement that had suddenly turned catastrophically against them. With the Thren threat reduced, the Prometheus's shields stabilized, though barely, hovering just above critical levels. Around the battlefield, the remaining Concorde ships, now numbering 15 after the destruction and retreat of the Thren vessels, continued their assault, though disorganization had begun creeping into their formation as ship after ship fell to Atlas's relentless, precise disabling strikes. At the center of the Concorde formation, the largest ship in the fleet, a new Drakon flagship commanded personally by Kesserin Vor himself, who had insisted on leading this decisive demonstration rather than trusting it to anyone else, began charging its main weapon, a massive cannon capable of far greater destruction than anything the earlier Olmar battleships had carried. Kesserin Vor's flagship is charging a weapon capable of critically damaging or destroying Prometheus in a single strike, Atlas warned. Current shield strength insufficient to survive direct impact. Recommend immediate evasive action, though success probability is limited given the weapon's tracking capabilities. How long until it fires? Elena asked. 18 seconds. Elena's mind raced. Evasion alone would not be enough. Disabling the weapon in time seemed nearly impossible, with the drone swarm still occupied disabling other ships across the battlefield. There had to be another way. Atlas, can you redirect enough drones to hit that weapon's power core in time? Redirecting drones would leave 4 other Concorde ships free to fire unimpeded during that window, Atlas replied. Doing so carries significant risk of additional hull damage and possible casualties from those unengaged vessels. Elena made her decision in an instant, the kind of decision that separated leaders who could survive impossible moments from those who could not. Do it. Protect the ship first. We'll handle the rest as it comes. Atlas redirected nearly half the drone swarm in a desperate, coordinated strike against Kesserin Vor's flagship, concentrating every available shot on the charging weapon's power core. With barely 3 seconds to spare before the cannon would have fired, the concentrated barrage struck home, rupturing the weapon's core in a brilliant flash of light that lit up the darkness of space like a small, brief sun. The explosion damaged the flagship severely, though it did not destroy it outright, leaving Kesserin Vor's command ship drifting and powerless alongside so many of its companions. Across the battlefield, the 4 ships that Atlas had warned would go unimpeded managed to land several solid hits against the Prometheus's weakened shields, driving them down to just above 15%, dangerously close to complete failure. Shields critical, Atlas reported. Recommend immediate withdrawal if additional attacks are sustained. Elena looked at the tactical display, watching the battle's outcome unfold in real time. Of the original 20 ships, 2 Thren vessels destroyed, and 3 retreated, leaving 15 Concorde ships remaining, of which 12 now drifted disabled across the battlefield, their engines and weapons silenced by the Prometheus's relentless, precise defense. Only 3 ships remained combat-capable, their crews clearly shaken by the devastation surrounding them, uncertain whether to press the attack further or follow the Thren's example and withdraw. A channel opened, unbidden, from one of the 3 remaining ships. It was General Rethus Call, aboard a secondary Drakon vessel he had taken command of, after his original flagship had been disabled weeks earlier in their first encounter. Admiral Cade, he said, his voice carrying a weight of exhaustion and something that might have been grudging respect. Kesserin Vor's flagship is disabled. 12 of our 20 ships lie helpless before you, and by all rights, you could destroy every one of them right now, ending this battle and eliminating a significant portion of the Concorde's military strength in the process. Why haven't you? Elena took a slow breath, steadying herself despite the exhaustion pulling at every part of her body after the intensity of the fight. Because that was never the goal, General. I told you before, we're not here to destroy the Concorde. We're here to prove that Earth deserves the freedom every other member species already enjoys. Killing helpless crews wouldn't prove that. It would only prove Kesserin Vor right, and I refuse to give him that satisfaction. There was a long pause on the channel. Then Rethus Kal spoke again, his voice quieter than before. "I withdraw my remaining forces, Admiral. This battle is over." The 3 remaining combat-capable Concord ships broke away, retreating slowly back toward Concord Prime, leaving behind a battlefield scattered with disabled ships, damaged but alive, their crews shaken but breathing, forced to reckon with what they had witnessed. Aboard the Prometheus, the bridge crew allowed themselves a moment of stunned, exhausted relief. Sophia Ruiz wiped tears from her eyes, without quite realizing she had started crying. Marcus Choi leaned heavily against his console, running trembling hands over readouts that showed extensive but survivable damage across the ship. Commander Okafor simply closed his eyes for a long moment, saying a quiet, private thanks to whatever he believed in, for having lived through what had, by every reasonable measure, seemed an impossible fight. Elena Cage sat in her command chair, watching the retreating Concord ships fade into the distance, and allowed herself, finally, to breathe. "Atlas," she said quietly. "Casualty report. 7 crew members injured, none critical. Thanks to timely medical response," Atlas replied. "No fatalities aboard Prometheus." Elena closed her eyes briefly, relief washing over her in a wave she hadn't expected to feel so strongly. No one had died, despite everything, despite 20 ships and weapons more advanced than anything they had faced before. Her crew had survived, and they had done it while holding on to the restraint and mercy that had defined their mission from the very beginning. News of the battle reached Concord Prime within hours, carried by the retreating fleet's own reports, impossible to hide or minimize given the scale of what had happened. 20 ships sent to destroy a single human vessel, and instead, most had been disabled rather than destroyed, their crews alive, and eventually returned safely to Concord space, while the Prometheus itself, though damaged, remained fully operational. The council chamber, when it convened once more, was quieter than it had been in the days leading up to the battle. Kesserin Vor, humbled by the destruction of his own flagship and the failure of the massive fleet he had championed, said little during the proceedings that followed. Voss, having spent the days of the battle rallying support among the smaller member species just as she had promised, stood before the full council and spoke with a conviction that finally seemed to reach beyond the usual divisions. "We sent 20 ships to destroy one," she said. "They could have killed thousands of Concord crew members without difficulty. Instead, they disabled ship after ship, choosing restraint even in the middle of the largest battle they have yet faced. I ask this council, honestly, is this the behavior of a species we should fear as monsters, or is it the behavior of a species asking, in the only way we have left them, to be treated as equals rather than prisoners?" The vote that followed was not unanimous. Kesserin Vor and a handful of the oldest, most traditional delegates still argued for continued restriction, still fearful of what humanity's growing strength might mean for the old order in the centuries to come. But for the first time since the no-fly zone had first been declared, the majority of the council, moved by Voss's arguments, and by the undeniable evidence of Earth's restraint, even in overwhelming victory, voted to lift the exclusion order entirely, restoring humanity's full rights as a Concord member species. The news reached the Prometheus 3 days later, as Marcus's engineering teams worked around the clock to repair the damage from the battle, patching hull breaches and restoring systems that had been pushed to their absolute limits. Elena read the message twice, standing quietly on the bridge, before allowing herself a small, tired smile. "It's over," she said softly. "For now," Marcus said, though there was no bitterness in his voice, only the weary understanding of someone who had lived through enough to know that peace, once won, still had to be maintained carefully afterward. "The Concord isn't going to forget what we can do. Some of them will always be afraid of us now." "Maybe that's all right," Elena said. "Fear that comes with respect isn't the worst thing in the world. It's a lot better than a cage." The Prometheus turned slowly, setting a course back toward Earth for the first time since its long, dangerous journey had begun. Behind it, the stars stretched endlessly, no longer forbidden, no longer closed off by an invisible line, drawn by species who had once believed they alone had the right to decide who could travel freely among them. When the ship finally arrived back in Earth's solar system, it was greeted not by silence, but by celebration. Word of the Prometheus's victory, and of the no-fly zone's end, had reached every corner of humanity, days before the ship itself returned, and people had gathered by the millions, watching news feeds and looking up at the sky, waiting for a glimpse of the ship that had fought for their freedom and won. Elena stood on the observation deck as the ship approached Earth, watching the familiar blue and green world grow larger on the screen before her, feeling a quiet, deep satisfaction that no words could quite capture. Marcus joined her there, as he had so many times throughout their long journey. "We did it," he said simply. "We did," Elena agreed. "But this isn't really the end, is it? This is just the beginning. Now we have to prove, every single day from here forward, that the trust we've earned was worth giving." Marcus smiled, tired but genuine. "I think humanity's pretty good at proving people wrong when it matters most." Behind them, Atlas continued its quiet work, monitoring the ship's systems, learning still, adapting still. A mind built to break every rule that had once kept humanity caged, now sailing home at the side of the species that had built it, ready for whatever challenges the future among the stars would bring. Earth was no longer a no-fly zone. And the galaxy, whether it liked it or not, had learned that humanity would never again accept a cage built by anyone else's fear. The Prometheus descended slowly toward its homeworld, carrying a crew who had fought not just for freedom, but for the right to be trusted with it. And the long, uncertain future of humanity among the stars had only just begun.